think the simplest is overly simplistic notion, and I think it's highly misleading as well to just equate graduate employability as employment outcomes like what we see in the policy. Apart from being a very simplistic, because of that's the easiest way things can be measured. I don't necessarily agree to that, but I personally think that the whole notion of graduate employability as a sort of outcome of education, perhaps, is there room to look at this as a form of a capability of an individual, not only to get a job, but to be able to progress and to develop that that capital, or the cultural capital, the intellectual capital, and whatever capital, using a bit of Bourdieu's concept to look at the accumulation of the individual capital for that person to then move on and not only get a job, but to be able to sustain, to be able to have satisfaction, and also to achieve a certain sense of well-being. So is it possible for us to crouch that whole concept of graduate employability as an individual form of capabilities?
Interesting. We touch on both tools and capitals. Yes, I love the concept, the capitals. Now, first, for me, it's just I'll go on to what Paul said, and once you just say, CD, you just say about the simplicity of the how we are trying to simplify everything university is doing within the concept of employability. My research, based on what I got from my research, and I think many people already, talk about it. I think somehow in the future we should change the term employability, because employability it's too simple, and it's very it makes people easily convert to employment. So when we use employability, we tend to think university as the place where we produce like the people with employment, and we just like underestimate other aspects, intellectual qualities and so positive personal qualities. And for my research, I found, for graduates to be employable, they need a range of, positive personal qualities, like dedication, hardworking, trustworthy, being honest. All of those things are, about educational things, right? But, we tend not to think about those things when we talk about employability. But to be employable, you need those things as well. So, I think in the future, so maybe Paul, you have bigger brains, so you may think about how we use another term, to capture the complexities, of all of those things. Otherwise, employability, it can be very risky and it's very dangerous. It's risky and dangerous, especially for international students, because in Australia, the way I agree, universities we are doing much more than employability and employment and job, etc. But the way we communicate with our students, the way we promote our programs, we tend to tie our education and programs to what we call human capital, qualification, degrees, and we keep talking about, like employment, and you come here to do the degrees, and we teach you, we equip you with a set of employability skills, or whatever, professional skills or generic skills, and we don't talk about the other things like, positive personal qualities, etc. So when our international students come here, because my research a lot about international students, I found that many of them actually, they come to Australia, their mindset is not very much about employment and employability. I know a lot of them, they have desire to learn about, like cultures, etc. in the host country, and some of them, they want to broaden their mindset, they want to gain new experiences. But the way universities, you look at the way marketing, etc. they do, they keep talking about the employment and the employability. So international students actually they change their mindset, you know, after they come to Australia. So it's quite dangerous. But then when I found, you know, for my research, again, it's about the negotiation process. After 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years, a large number of international students, and just your research about this space as well, they actually decided to leave Australia because, you know, so they find no attachment in this country. You know, a number decide to go back to their home country, a number, you know, decide to go to leave Australia. Okay, so, you know, the university perspective, we actually impose, you know, what we are wanting, because we want employment outcomes rate so that we can apply for funding and ranking, right? But, you know, so those things actually is not really from, you know, many students. Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking.
No,
yeah.
and I think you're really right, is that there's a fundamental danger for universities in adopting the kind of human capital model, you know, because what you end up saying is that a university degree is important because it sends a signal to employers that this graduate is worth employing. But what you're basically saying is nothing educationally important happens at university. All it is a sorting device to work out who's worth employing and who's worth not, but actually what students study isn't important. And that, you know, and eventually you undermine universities as educational institutions. And so universities have a real responsibility, and one they've not lived up to, I would say, to talk far more clearly about what a degree gives you. And the whole time they leave the knowledge out. They talk about graduateness or employability in terms that leaves the knowledge out. They're missing out the most important thing they give to students. You know, so for me, we can, you know, I think, you know, there's some really interesting work on capabilities. Melanie Walker and Monica McLean have done some work where they look at how do you develop curricula, this in the context of South Africa, that produce professionals committed to the public good. So they look at social work, engineering, a range of different professionals, and they look at how do we produce public good professionals that develop capabilities that are knowledge rich. And so for me, one of the really big problems with employability is we get into this generic way of talking. We talk as if there's such a thing as communication skills. There's such a thing as problem solving skills, and there's not. You know, if you problem solve in architecture, that doesn't mean you can solve a physics problem, you know, because the knowledge is different. So we have to have knowledge-rich ways of talking about what education gives to students, and knowledge-rich ways of talking about the graduates we produce. And at the moment, and you can understand from the perspective of policymakers, they're dealing with the whole of the higher education system. So they're dealing with every discipline, and so the knowledge disappears. And so they want to talk generically. And part of our job as universities is to say, no, there's something really important about the different forms of knowledge. So the kind of research I've been doing over quite a long period now, first of all, we tracked sociology students through the 3 years of their degree in a number of English universities. And then the current project I've got, we're tracking chemistry and chemical engineering students through their undergraduate degrees in some English, South African and United States universities, and now we've just started to track them through the first 3 years of employment to try and get a knowledge-rich way of describing what those students get from those studies. And for me, that's the thing I'm really interested in doing in research, is that how do we start to talk about the nature of being a graduate in a way that includes the knowledge, because that's the fundamental thing we give them as universities, and we have to make that a part of the conversation.
I totally agree with you. I think on two of a very important point. I think the whole notion of a signaling, I think, is terribly outdated and is terribly misleading. I'm an economist by training, and if you were to put that whole signaling concept into our context today, then I would say that we are all doomed, because the whole value of that signaling theory is the ability for one to differentiate yourself. And as university that's also explains why we never had to deal with that issue of employment 20, 30 years ago, because everyone goes to the university, ultimately get a job as a graduate, regardless of what you study. As long as you got your university degree, you automatically can get a job. But because of we are in a massified system, we are going into many of our systems are already at the brink of being a universal system. That signaling theory does not work anymore, because the value of differentiation that one has really diminished because of more and more graduates are coming out into the market. But also the very problematic notion, I think this was at least 10 to 15 years ago in the UK context, this whole notion of generic and transferable skills. When I was doing my PhD, that was one of the topics that I also happened to unpack on, and we tend to overly simplify that one. Like as you rightly mentioned, problem solving seems like is transferable, but I mean that is not the real case. Like if Pak Din is an engineer, he's trained to solve a problem in engineering. Give him an education problem or policy problem, he may not be able to solve. And that is again another notion that it seems that what really puzzles me is that this discussion is the lack of ability of the university itself, the academics and the scholars, to come to the forefront and lead in this discussion. Will you agree with me? It has been dictated by economists, by policymakers, by everyone out there except academics and the scholars who should be at the forefront arguing all this.
I completely agree. Universities have a incredibly important role in society to look after knowledge, and that gives us a very serious duty and responsibility, to actually, we're not politicians, we're not marketing people, we're people committed to knowledge, and we're disciplined by, we should be disciplined by knowledge, and so when we do things like we celebrate our achievement, in inverted commas, in university rankings when we know they're nonsense, we know that they, for so many reasons, and it's been shown time and time again, that they mean nothing. But yet we say, oh yeah, well that's a good measure, and then policymakers in lots of contexts, including Malaysia, take that as a measure of institutional quality, even though we know it isn't. When we kind of tell students, come and study with us, and we kind of give them this strange generic version of what they'll gain, as if that's meaningful, to me that undermines our position in society. We need to be more serious than that. And with so many, if you look at development graduate transferable skills in the UK, the position of universities was like, yeah, we can do that if you give us enough money. And again, that's not right. You should be saying, no, we can't do that, because that's not what actually as institutions we do. But what we can do is this, which we think is much more important and much more related to what a university degree can give us. So for me, being much more sensitive, much more clear about what's distinctive about what university offers, and not kind of trying to always dominate the conversation and say, yeah, we can do that. To me is, I would completely agree that that's a responsibility that universities have not fulfilled in a way that they can feel proud of.
Yeah.
And perhaps also, yes, but then go ahead.
Sorry. Hi. I think I'm just back in my small office at home now. Hi everyone. So I was on the road just now. So I was listening to you guys. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for having me. I've turned on the light so you can see me much clearer. So yeah. Okay. Right. We were talking about a few things, and I guess the biggest thing that you have at the current moment is perception, and this is where everything falls down to. When the public sees the numbers, it's an easy number that everyone could relate to. Oh, employability, 98%. Wow, it's good. So the perception spreads like wildfire. And I think the university is a bit laid back in terms of challenging these things. How I'm going to put this, I don't want to be seen as someone against journal paper publications or things like that, but as this becomes heavier and heavier, this publications, peer-read publications where the public does not care about, lesser and lesser academics who like to engage the society in terms of writing in the newspapers, social media, and bits and pieces like that. So this is where the 21st century, I would argue, saying that this is a 21st century trait of an academic, where I guess correcting the perception of the society on certain things that is being played about. So it's just like people sending you wrong messages or incorrect information about something. So this is where I think the university is a bit lacking. So we're so busy working on academic work, which is academic at the end of the day, but we are not handling this situation here. For example, in Malaysia, when you talk about graduate employability, it's just basically a number of people being employed. And for me, I was the focal officer at the ministry for 3 years. And the first meeting I had was, I just couldn't comprehend how simple it was. You get a job, good, that's great. You don't get a job, let's work on it. And every single initiative from graduate employability stems on the last 6 months of the tenure of the students being in the university, as if the university in 4 years would change you as a new human being altogether. Your face lifted. You're basically a new model of yourself, which is very different from the first time you go in. It's just insane. And this unfortunate bit about saying that whether you get a job or not. And I once said, employability in this case is pseudo employability numbers. It looks really nice. Unfortunately, it masks many things. And I said to them, look, if I were to look into data, I would like to know the hard employability, those who are being employed in the area that they are trained. I would like to look at soft employability, those who are being employed in the area that they're trained and not in the area where they are trained, a part-time kind of thing, so that they can actually move on. You have real employability, those who are actually been there for about a year and staying on, so that either they shift into a new area. And you've got attached employability, those who would be Malaysia is very big on this, entrepreneurial. So whether you become an entrepreneur in the area that you're trained or not, or you acquire skills much later, it's all about connecting the dots, isn't it? And there's always that first point of you coming to the university. It's not only about the knowledge that we give you, it's about you connecting the dots of multiple knowledge so that it makes a lot of sense of you when you go out and talk to the public. So and this is what comes to my second point. I think we are not clear on the end game. Unfortunately, people has overtaken us on the end game. When students come in and do the first year, the end game isn't played to them properly. So they do not see. I mean, again, it boils down to the last 6 months of the career of the student becoming a student, yeah. And it's only then they decide. Now I've got good grades. What should I do now? And this is when I help them in terms of, I'm the focal officer, graduate employability. When the employability drops below 80%, it's my ass on the line. So you mind my French. So you come with all sorts of programs, and we started off with a roadmap. First year, what you need to do. Second year, third year, fourth year. Rather than just the fourth year, you get a bloody good CV going out, and the problem is when they start to write the CV, because the idea is so unplanned, you've got nothing to write. And this is where the problems come about. So, I mean, not having that focus, being there, it's also another thing. So I think there's two things here. One is about the perception and how we define it. And I think we have been overtaken by a few people due to that, I mean, being in the university. And secondly is, how do we portray the end game? Whether it's enough for us to say that the university is an institution that gives you that knowledge, whether people want to hear that or not in the 21st century, because we're dealing with millennial kids now. They don't care about knowledge. They care about what's going to happen to me. And you've got to think. You've got to think for me.
No, see that. There I completely disagree with you. They do care about knowledge. You know, this kind of discourse that students are somehow different has been around as long as there's been students. We do these longitudinal studies tracking students through their engagement with knowledge. They're just as earnest knowers. They're just as good and as bad as they've always been. And they're hungry for knowledge. They're hungry for what this knowledge can do for them. But what I think, in terms of the end game, I agree with you that, we need to have universities need to have a much clearer sense of what we're educating students for. How our curriculum designed in particular ways to produce particular kinds of graduates. And we did some work in Lancaster where within the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, where we got people together and we said, in your degree programs, what kind of graduates are you trying to produce? So Lancaster has a very famous sociology department, and for them, they were trying to produce public sociologists. So let's think about how your curriculum is designed to do that. And for me, kind of educationally, it would be fun, kind of universities around the world put an awful lot of resource into individual academic development, courses for teachers. And actually, I think it'd be far better to shift some of that resource into conversations about how is our curriculum designed to produce particular kinds of graduates. They involve academics, it involve students, it involve learning technologists, experts in employability, and they collectively design a curriculum together that actually has a very clear educational intention. And at the moment, the educational intention of lots of curricula isn't particularly clear. It's kind of done how it's always been done.
And this is why I'm saying, this is why the students care less. If we can't, we don't do anything now, because I mean, 4 years, they're still blurry, and I'm still not sure. And perhaps you're right. Maybe the junction has not been reached right now. But going out and talking to alumni, the response is stronger by saying, yeah, what you learn in the university will be 10% of what you apply. You get what I mean? And this is something stinging for an academic being teaching, right? You don't want your alumni to be saying that to the students. And I think I've applied more than 10% that I've learned. You get what I mean? There's always ways, and this is where I'm very concerned. And I totally agree with you, Paul. It's the syllabus. I think it's also the pedagogy. I think something needs to be done with the pedagogy. I mean, it's delivery. How you? I think the enticing of the student thinking is kind of lacking, because everything you've got to. I know you've got this OBE where you file in things and sort of like give proof. I'm not saying that I'm not a fan, but it really shackles you and really limits you in terms of how you entice student thinking. And most of the time you are limited by the system and the system you create rather than giving it a free go. So I mean, please go on. I mean,
Doria was raising her hands.